The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marina Sprocki, and I'm the host of Always Another Way podcast. I have a master's in professional counseling, and I am the IPPY Award-winning author of Stop Looking for a Husband, Find the Love of Your Life, and Nasty Divorce, A Kid's Eye View. I write positive divorce advice for the HuffPost, and I'm trained in clinical hypnosis. And this podcast is for out-of-the-box thinkers and for those who hear the call of hope and always another way. And if you're very rigid and set in your beliefs, this is probably not your cup of tea. However, you should note, tastes can and do change. And we have a really super exciting show today. We're going to be talking to Bob Richie about foraging and ethnobotany. And, my first kind of foray into just plants as something other than food, this was maybe like 12 years ago. I was on a lake in Dallas, and we were riding one of those like banana tubes. And, I told the guy, you can go as fast as you want, but please don't tip us. So, of course, he goes fast enough so that we flip over. And the girl behind me has shoes on, and her shoe like goes all the way up my nose, like feels like my nose is broken. I am bleeding in the water, and I have a really high pain tolerance. So if I'm like crying, it really, really hurts. Long story short, we go to the, emergency room, and then my husband at the time is like, they think he's, like it's domestic violence. I'm like, no, it was a boating accident. We get out of there, and what forms is a bruise, like right under my nose that looks just like a Hitler mustache. I was like, oh no, like I can't have this. So a friend of mine is like, have you ever tried arnica? And I was like, no. So I go and find some, put it on, and in like 2 days, it's almost gone. And then fast forward maybe 2 years later, my elderly grandmother falls down the stairs, and my grandfather calls me, and he's like, she looks like she's been in like Rocky V. So I send them some arnica, and the little pellets too. She puts it on, and in like 2 days, he's like, it's a miracle. He's just so excited, couldn't believe that this could happen. Well, there's just so much more that maybe you know or maybe you don't know, and there's actually still a lot to know about plants, plants for food, medicinal plants, poisonous plants. Where do you find them? Can you grow them? All kinds of questions. So I'm going to talk to a guy who knows a lot about all of this stuff. So Bob Richie is a Dallas native who raises bees, chickens, rabbits, cats, and dogs. He likes birds, plants, bugs, fish, herps, I don't know what that is, but kayaking, fly fishing, anthropology, archaeology. An amateur naturalist since an early age, Bob has spent much of his life outdoors. When he's not spending time outdoors, Bob works for an architectural firm in Deep Ellum. He's also the owner of the Custom Coop Company, which designs and builds custom chicken coops in the Dallas area. Bob is a certified Texas Master Naturalist and past president of the Trinity Valley Beekeepers Association and the Dallas's local honeybee club. He's the father of 2 grown children, an avid bicycle rider, and an active registered yoga instructor. So, welcome to the show, Bob.
I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you. And I meet people all sorts of cool places. I met you at the Refuge Meditation Studio, which is another cool place in Dallas. But I just love all the cool knowledge you have. And so I figured we'd just start where you want to start and then make our way around.
Yeah, let's do that, because this is kind of a first for me. Generally, I'm out in the field and we're pointing and looking and tasting at plants. So this will be an interesting experiment to see how this goes. I'm excited.
Cool. So
the homeopathics are really interesting. Europeans have been using them for years, and it kind of shows the difference between Eastern and Western medicine. So in Western medicine, we have a tendency to prescribe things that address a symptom. In Eastern medicine, in homeopathics in particular, these things address the problem within our body systemically, so that our body is naturally able to fight things off. So a really widely used homeopathic Sinusalia is for hay fever and for congestion. It's actually made from belladonna, which is a nightshade, which grows here in North Texas, silver nightshade. But, homeopathics, they are potentized is what it's called. They're reduced down and down and down so that when you finally take the homeopathic medicine, you're getting very, very small amounts of the plant material, but your body builds on that and creates, it helps to create, to build strength in your body to resist that. So whereas if you had hay fever, you would go get a decongestant. The decongestant is really not doing anything except making your mucus
you
dry
dry.
up. Yeah, whereas
And
the
speedy.
homeopathics work with your body to keep that from happening again. So they're very interesting. They're also what's called adaptogens, and so homeopathic medicines, whether they work or not, they won't harm you, and they won't counteract any other medications, either pharmaceuticals or other medications that you're taking. So they're very safe in that regard. In America, we still have not really embraced the whole homeopathic movement, but arnica is one of my favorites. Like you say, it is
Oh my
very
gosh.
interesting and very, and it's from a plant called Arnica montana. And again, it's reduced down in strength, but your body still sees it and reacts to it and works with it.
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
well, before we get started, let me just say that I am not a doctor. I'm not a physician. I'm not a pharmacist. So all my knowledge is empirical. It's stuff that I have learned from other people or from reading. That said, I walk about 1,000 people a year at different places, and we eat and taste and use stuff, and no one has ever got sick from anything that I have had them eat. So
There we go.
there is that, yeah. Along those lines too, one of the most important things when you're using edible local plants is to be able to positively identify what you're eating. There's lots of plants that look like other plants, and you have to positively identify it. So you have to be able to, and there's some tricks to looking at plants and knowing exactly what you're eating, and this is especially true with mushrooms.
Yeah. Right.
So
you can be poisonous.
they
Not
can be
good.
poisonous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so I think as as a society, we are really removed from our food supply. We're used to, I have been a vegetarian since 1978, but people are really against hunting, but they're more than willing to go to the grocery store and buy some cow or pig that's cut up and put in a styrofoam tray and wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
This animal, depending on where you shop, may have been in a commercial feedlot, standing in their own waste for, the majority of their life, pumped with antibiotics so that they don't get sick. And, their waste in those environments just creates, whereas it can be used in other places, if it's used naturally, it can be used as fertilizer, but when it's concentrated, it becomes toxic. Wendell Berry, who was an environmentalist and philosopher, said that, God gave us a perfect solution and we made, dozens of problems with it, because cows, basically, they walk around and eat grass, they, excrete, and it provides fertilizer. But when you get it all concentrated, then you're creating a toxic mess, and the same for the animals. It's bad for them.
Yeah, of course.
Big agriculture doesn't help us either. Back in the day, when most cattle were grass-fed, the grading standards for meat was different. When we started growing corn and feeding cows corn, which they're not supposed to eat, it started causing them to have fat in their meat. This is what marbled meat is. Most grass-fed cows don't really get that kind of fat, so the USDA changed the grading for meat to make the fatty marbled meat the standard.
Wow.
Just to to help promote the big agriculture use of those giant monocultures.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So we're removed, and how do we get, where are we going next?
Well, and
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
don't know our farmers. I like to shop at my local farmers markets. I know lots of the people that grow my food, and I do eat eggs. I know the lady that has the chickens that my eggs come from. I had chickens for years and years. I just recently got rid of them. I've had them for the last 16 years, so I'm trying to kind of take care of a few less things in
And
my
they
life.
taste different. Because I've had an egg from like a chicken from somebody, and then an egg from the store, and they're two entirely different flavors.
They taste completely different. They have a lot more nutrients in them, so there is a huge difference in the quality of that product also.
Yeah.
I just think it's better when we know the people that grow our food, that we can actually talk to them and see them, and we need more of that.
Yeah,
So,
and I've noticed there's a little bit more around Dallas of like, I've seen some local farms, like, and even local, I think it's called Burgundy's Meats, where they go from one place and they're really careful about what they do with their animals. And
Yep.
then, and like you said, farmers markets where people are going to tell you that they're not putting pesticides, they're not putting chemicals on their food. They're growing it. You can see the person. You
Yeah.
can try their stuff. Yeah.
that and CSAs are also good. These, where you buy into a farmer's produce and you get produce every week over the growing season. And some of them have meat also, for those of you that
Yeah.
do consume that. I'll get back to the positive ID real quick. So there is a plant. I always encourage people not to eat anything that looks like wild carrots. So Queen Anne's lace, wild carrots, these plants look very, very similar to water hemlock. In Dallas, we do have water hemlock. That's what Socrates was fed. It doesn't take, 1 or 2 bites to put you in a hospital or possibly kill you. So wild carrots are not that great anyway. So,
Stay away.
get to your local farmer's market and buy your carrots and stay away from anything that looks like a wild carrot.
Yeah. Wow.
But-
That's good to know.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
so
you would
that's-
think somebody might just be like, oh, carrot.
Yeah, and that's one of the first things I tell people when they're walking with me is to just avoid anything that looks like that. And so you're good. So yeah, ethnobotany is something that always interested me. I grew up in Dallas and spent lots of time, all my time outside down in the creek, and we, would eat wild grapes and dewberries, and so I kind of had an interest in wild onions and in wild native plants for a long time. And, just in the last 5 or 6 years, I've really started delving deep into the plants that we have that are growing locally here. And people are amazed when we walk, they'll say, well, how many plants are we going to see? And I say, well, I don't know, 25, 35. And they're like, wow, how far are we going to walk? I mean, we're going to walk, 50 feet in a circle.
Isn't that
These
amazing?
plants are all growing here. Yeah.
Who knew?
Who knew?
You.
Yeah, well, yeah, and other people too. Ethnobotany, that is the scientific study of the traditional knowledge and customs of a people concerning plants and their medical, religious, and other uses. I always read that because I always screw it up.
Yeah.
But the other uses could include dye, they include food, they include, bedding, other things like that. And so that's really what interests me, just a broad range, not just the medical plants, but the edible ones also. A lot of this knowledge native peoples had, but we didn't ask them, and it was all it was all passed down orally, so they didn't have much of it written down.
Yeah.
And when we ran them out of our country and exterminated them,
Ran them out of their country.
ran them out of their country. We
somewhere
did
else,
not, we did not take the time to collect this knowledge that.
Which is so unfortunate, really.
It really is, yeah, because it was, there are some books. There's a lady named Sanapia who was, she was the last Comanche medicine woman, and she did actually write down some of the plants that she used, but, and it's a really great book, but some of the plants, or most of the plants in here are named in Comanche. Some of them have botanical names, and some of them are just have the Comanche name, and then it says little gray plant.
Which
so
could be.
we really don't know what that is
Yeah.
that she was talking about. But there are a lot of different sources to find, to find these, find out what these plants are. One of my favorites is this little golden book, which you can get online for about $3, and most of the stuff in here is edible.
Wow.
And it's just, it's a great way to figure out what you're looking at. Now, this covers the whole United States, not just Texas, but it is some great information in there. Some of the some of the knowledge of native peoples was passed down to settlers, and the settlers did use a lot of the plants that the native peoples did. But then later that knowledge was lost from them too when we started using, pharmacies. It's interesting that until about the 1950s, the United States pharmacopoeia was almost all, or actually was all plant-based medicines. Sometime around the 50s, the pharmaceutical companies started coming on, and they lobbied Congress to have the traditional medicines replaced with something that was manufactured so that they could sell it to us.
Yeah. Which is too bad that you can't have just like room for a little bit of everything.
Right?
You know?
Yeah, it
well,
really is.
Choices.
Yeah. I'm also a beekeeper, like you said, and, local honey is very antibacterial, antiviral, antiseptic. I mean, it puts Neosporin to shame if you use it on cuts and burns and bruises.
I've
But
heard that.
pharmaceutical companies can't sell it to us, so they don't want you believing that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then just like with that, you can just try it. It's not going to hurt you.
It's just, yeah.
And then see what
it's
happens.
An adaptogen.
Yeah.
It won't do anything. It won't do anything bad. So yeah, it's great stuff. I have actually a study by the University of Madison, Wisconsin, and we'll talk about a few specific plants here. One of the plants that the natives used was a spiny ash, a Xanthosxylum clavus hercules, or Hercules club, and it was called toothache tree. So you could take the leaves or the bark and put it in your mouth and chew it up, and it would make your gums and your lip numb, and so that would relieve the pain from a toothache.
Wow.
The tree is directly related. It is almost the same tree as Szechuan pepper, and it grows here in North Texas
interesting.
all over the place. And in the fall, it has little red berries, and you can grind them up and use them as Szechuan pepper. Szechuan pepper is kind of a misnomer in that the Szechuan food is hot because of the chilies, and the Szechuan is really a mouth numbing. It's really a numbing agent. So it's not,
interesting.
it's really not Szechuan pepper, but a Szechuan numbing agent.
Very interesting.
So, and these things make great, they make great additions to, mixed drinks, to, craft cocktails and stuff too. So
Very cool.
I've worked recently with a chef from Denver. We did a show that'll be on PBS in January called Roots to Ranches, and we went foraging in a Trinity forest, and that's one of the things that we picked. And then she made a lovely drink for dinner with that, and with some of the other, cooked some of the other plants that we
Just from like walking outside and finding
just from
things.
walking outside and finding things. Yeah,
How cool is that?
it was great.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. So I just recently got back from Colorado and had a chance to go to Denver and eat at a restaurant too, which was very nice. So great people, great fun, and it's always interesting to show, especially chefs, what's out there and what there is available. This stuff is hyper local and hyper in season, so you either got to eat it now or preserve it. There's a few ways that I use to preserve native plants. 4 main ones. The first one being an infusion. An infusion is just where you take the plant and you make a tea, basically. You just pour hot water on it, let it steep for a while, and then drink it as a tea.
Okay.
The second one is a decoction, which is really similar, except you put the plant material in water and boil it for 10 minutes or so, and then strain it. I like to use paper coffee filter. I just strain it through that. And then decoctions, and then a poultice. You basically just take the plant and mash it up and rub it on whatever wound or bite or sting that you have. And then the third one is an infusion, which you soak the plant material in alcohol or some kind of oil base for a period of time, usually a few months, in a dark place, and then strain it out and use it either topically or internally.
And is it more concentrated when you do that?
It's more concentrated when you do that, and it allows you, so like elderberry, I like making elderberry syrup, and we have lots, I mean, elderberries the last couple of years in Dallas have been really good.
Yeah, and I've heard lots of good stuff about what elderberry does.
Yeah, it is. It's an immune booster. It's a really great plant material. The problem is a lot of times by the time that it blooms and then it goes to fruit, by the time the fruits show up, the birds and the possums get most of it. So I usually harvest the flower and soak it in a high proof rum to make my infusion. And mood lifter.
Nice.
So
like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, it just makes you feel good. It makes your body happy. And, I'm not sure if it's the elderberry or the rum. But
Oh, okay. Together, they're good.
Together, they're really good. Yeah. So we also have this issue with our beautiful lawns, and what we have been trained to think a beautiful lawn is a lawn that's just strict monoculture with no weeds, no nothing.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be farther from true. I mean, this is part of the problem with our water supply. It's also part of the problem with chemicals. The chemical companies, in Vietnam War and the Korean War were making Agent Orange, and they were selling this to the government. When those wars ended, they didn't want to stop losing money from making those chemicals, so they looked around to see, where can we sell these things? And they're like, let's sell them to the American people. So Roundup or glyphosate is one very, very small chemical compound different from Agent Orange. It is basically Agent Orange, and you can find it in anybody's body. If you tested our blood, you would find it. If you tested a child's blood, it's so pervasive in the environment.
And huge lawsuits going on right now because it's proven to cause cancer-like. So known really bad.
And it's all about the money.
Yeah.
It's really all about the money. Dandelions, some of my favorite plants, dandelions, plantago, plantain, and curly dock. These plants grow everywhere, and they grow in your yard. And I tell people all the time, dandelion is kind of my poster child. Everyone knows you can eat it.
Yeah.
But dandelions are so good in so many respects. I mean, you can make wine out of the flower. The stems of the flower, it's almost all solid vitamin C that's just really good. You can dig up the root. They have a kind of a tapered tap root. You can dig that root up and dry it, and it makes a kind of a coffee substitute. It doesn't have
I've heard that.
doesn't have any caffeine in it. We only have one plant in the United States that has caffeine, and that's a really interesting story too. And if we have time, I'll tell that one. Yeah, that's Ilex vomitoria, or Yopon holly, which we use all over and grows native here. But so, everyone knows in North Texas we have really black clay soil. So if you just let the dandelions die in your yard, not only when that taproot starts to decompose, it opens up these conical shaped openings in the soil that allow the water to penetrate and absorb. That is also adding organic matter to your soil. So
and probably making it more efficient too.
And making it more efficient. Yeah. So you don't have to water as much. So they're
keepers.
They're keepers. Yeah. And like the curly dock, it's directly related to burdock, which grows a little farther north. It's a wonderful edible plant. It also the root is a liver cleanser, so you can make a tea out of the root. And if you are recovering from chemotherapy or alcoholism, it can help to cleanse the liver.
Nice.
The plantain, it's a wonderful plant to eat too, but it can also be made into a poultice. I just usually put it in my mouth and chew it up, and it's good for bee stings or poison ivy, and it really dries stuff up. And it also can be made into a tea, and it used to be used for dysentery. So, diarrhea or dysentery. And then everyone knows we can eat dandelions. I actually have
I've had the leaves that I think they call them like chicoties or something is
Yeah.
what they call it,
Yeah.
the little leaves, but we used to eat those. Like my dad would make a salad of those with some cucumbers and tomatoes and onions.
Yeah, no, they're great. I do that all the time. I've got lots of pictures. But, just for instance, this study was done in 1981 by the University of Madison at Wisconsin, and it's just about wild edibles, things that grow. These are the things that we're buying, we're basically buying Roundup and Agent Orange to pour on in our yard because we don't think they look good there. We ought to be eating them. But if you look at this study, when you look at the nutritional value of these wild plants, it's just extremely high compared to the things that we eat and buy in the grocery store. So if you look, just for instance, if you look at a head of lettuce, so a head of lettuce per 100 grams has 335 milligrams of vitamin A. It has 7 milligrams of vitamin C. If you look at dandelion, for the same amount for 100 grams, it has 14,000 milligrams of vitamin A.
Whoa.
It has 35 milligrams of vitamin C. I mean, these medicinal plants, these were very important to native peoples when they're coming out of wintertime, because if you think about overwintering as a hunter-gatherer, they were mostly eating meat and nuts, or what they called pemmican they made by taking dried meat, dried nuts, and dried berries and grinding it up and then have some kind of fat binder. And so they weren't getting any greens, they weren't getting any, vitamins. And so coming out of winter, these plants were really important to native peoples in order to get their bodies healthy again.
Some fiber and some macronutrients.
And some fiber too, yeah. And get their bodies healthy and moving. I have a really good friend, Johnny Wolf. He's an herbalist and a farmer also, and he likes to say that cities are nature under siege.
Yeah. And then back to the thing about like our lawns. And so I walk around in my neighborhood, and there's one they have the sweetest lawn because it's not grass. It is just all these gorgeous like plant, and to me, it's so pretty to look at.
Oh.
Because it's just like, and they're all, and I know it's like a permaculture stuff. So it's like native to Texas, not a lot of water, and so which is good for a million other reasons, environmentally, but it's really beautiful because it's just not, you just see green and then you're like, poison whatever. And then and especially in Texas heat, like and I see people when it's like a water ban, like sprinkling, and it just,
Well, and that's interesting too. The city of Dallas, we'll go into water ban. Highland Park and Park Cities, they buy all their water from us, and they don't have a water ban when we do. So
and I've seen people like it's raining and their sprinklers are going off. You're like, come now.
Yep. Yeah, and biodiversity, that's something we really need. That's something that we're losing just on the earth in general. And so the more biodiversity we have, the better it is. Potatoes are a good example of that. McDonald's and Whataburger and all those people, they use one type of potato, russet Burbank potato, because they're big and long and they can make long, skinny French fries out of them. Well, they have to basically kill everything in the field before they plant them. Then they nuke everything from the soil microbes to every living thing. And then they come back and just add, regular phosphate, nitrogen, and potassium fertilizer to grow these potatoes that they can then dump Roundup on, and it kills everything but the potatoes. Some, you talk to organic farmers and they're like, well, do you have to do that to your potatoes? And they say, no, I don't grow russet Burbank potatoes. There's 200 other kinds of potatoes I can grow that don't have that problem. So
right. And who, not everybody's making, at home. You don't need
you're
that
not
long,
making
skinny
French fries. Yeah. So
or you could just cut up whatever potato and make fries.
Right. Yeah. So, there's lots of ways around it. We just have chose, to
aesthetics.
And so it is interesting. So all these plants, they can be found everywhere. Some of my favorite places to look are railroad right-of-ways. I try not to harvest plants that are on the slope coming down from the train tracks, because they do spray pesticides, but when you get to the outsides and come up, that's a great place to look in the cities. Hike and bike trails.
Because nobody's spraying for that. They don't care.
They don't care.
Yeah.
No one's spraying for it.
Which is good for the people looking for it.
Yeah. You also ought to be considerate. If there's only one, I generally won't take it, but if there's plenty, then, that's fair game.
Any other kind of I guess, I don't know if it's like politeness or ethical, nice ruls about that?
Well,
if
it's private, if it's private property, you should always have permission. But a lot of stuff that I harvest, I make jelly every year from Mexican plums. You know, they're all around White Rock Lake. They're all up and down in my neighborhood. People use them for landscaping. They're in the parkways, and people are using them for landscaping. And when the fruit gets ripe, it just falls onto the ground.
So there you go.
I've harvested from dart stations before, you know, Keys Park. There's just, these things are all over, and they're just making fruit that is just going to waste. And so,
Waste not, want not.
waste not, want not. Yeah. So it's good to go get it and use it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing against it. You know, parks and like I said, bike paths, creeks are another great place, because generally no one's down in the creek, you know, spraying poison. It's just pretty much wild and taking care of itself. So those are some of my favorite places, you know, to find native plants. You know, and you get them at, like I said, you have to get them during the time period that they're growing. And so a lot of these plants I will get in the fall. Prairie tea is a really lovely tea that lots of settlers and ate or drank. And so I'll dry it and keep it for all year long. In the springtime, there's a plant called cleavers. It's sticky weed. You guys would know it if you saw it. It's also called bedstraw. This is a great plant. You can steam it. It's really sticky, but once you steam it or boil it for just a few minutes, it's a really lovely green to eat.
Like in a salad or
like in a salad, or
something?
just like steamed spinach or something.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
and you know, the settlers use it as the nickname bedstraw came because they would carry big cloth sacks to use as mattresses, and then when they would get someplace they were going to stay, they would gather this stuff up. It kind of sticks together and make a mattress and fill their mattress with it. And then when they left, they'd just take it out, and it provided a little bit of insect resistance also. So,
Double duty.
and you make a tea out of it, and it's a great cleanser for your lymph system.
Oh, that's
So
good to
I mean,
know.
it's you know, these plants have so many uses that we don't know and have lost.
And free.
And free, and free. That's the
I
thing,
mean,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's the thing. They can't be sold to you by anybody, so that's why you're not seeing them on the shelves at the pharmacy. And
Yeah.
so yeah. So let's see. So fungus. So fungi are very interesting too. I don't eat and harvest that many mushrooms. Mushrooms are the ones that are toxic are really toxic, and they're not real pretty when they make you sick. You mostly just throw up and throw up and throw up.
Ugh,
So
not
it's
good.
it's not fun. But there are certain mushrooms like oyster mushrooms which grow, you know, around. I harvest them at White Rock Lake. There's also cloud ear or wood ear mushrooms. Those are the mushrooms that is in your hot and sour soup when you have Chinese food. And you
What
know,
about the mayatakes? I love those.
Chanterelles and mayatakes, yeah, they grow farther north. We don't really have them here.
I love those.
But yeah, those mushrooms, they're really distinctive. There's really nothing else that looks like them, so you can be pretty safe. You know, reishi mushrooms is a gammaderma. Those grow locally, and those are pretty distinctive. There's not a lot of mistaking those. So those are the ones I kind of stick with.
Yeah, and mushrooms have lots and lots of really good health benefits.
They do
too,
have
yeah.
really good health benefits, and it's interesting that we haven't really. I've taken some classes from Dennis
Paul?
Benjamin,
Oh, okay.
who is Paul Stamets too,
Yeah.
but not from him. I haven't taken classes from him, but Dennis Benjamin is an oncologist with Cook Children's Medical Center, but he's also one of the curators of the mushrooms at the BRIT, the Botanical Research Institute of Texas.
Nice.
And I was in a lecture he gave a couple of months ago, and you know, no one's really done any research on mushrooms that definitively say what good they do for you. I mean, you know, most of it's empirical. The only one he said that had actual clinical research done was psilocybin, and they've been using it for PTSD and for trauma patients, and it's very promising in that regard.
Yeah, I did a show on that, and I went to the first psychedelic symposium in LA last year, talking about using not only just psilocybin mushrooms but other entheogens
Right.
too, for things where they are really showing like dramatic improvements
Yeah.
and lots of things.
And so we need to do this. We need to do this kind of research on our other medicinal mushrooms.
Right, 'cause there's
you know,
like-
mushrooms are so pervasive in our society, in our ecosystem. You mostly, the part that comes up, that's the reproducing body. So that's basically the sex part. The rest, the real mushroom is under or in, under the ground or in the wood that it's growing on, and it's just a bunch of mycelia, a bunch of fibers, and the plants use these fibers to talk to each other. They use them. So mycorrhizal fungi are what allow plants. So plants in and of themselves are not very efficient at taking up nutrients. And so they have this symbiotic relationship with these fungi, these mycorrhizal fungi that live in the rhizosphere around the roots of all plants. The fungus transforms the minerals and other things that the plant uses into a form that it can take up, and in return the plant secretes a sugary substance that supports the mycorrhizal fungi to live.
So
and
cool.
It's been shown that trees and forests, they talk to each other, they transfer carbon resources, but with these mycorrhizal fungi, they're out there, they're all hooked together talking to each other, and we're up here thinking they're all just dumb plants.
Isn't that amazing? I just got like
Yeah.
a visual of like all that going on underneath. Like how cool.
I think I
Yeah.
have read that you can take a pinch of soil, and you will have close to 7 miles worth of mycorrhizal fungi in one little pinch of soil. Wow. So they're tiny.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's
the
pretty
ones we don't know, the ones that are to be discovered, most of them are probably too small for the human eye to see, but they're everywhere, and they are doing, what they're supposed to be doing. We just don't know what that is.
Yeah. So amazing. Yeah. Super cool.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. What other coolness you got?
Well, there's a lot of, like I say, so there's a lot of places where you can get this information. There's some online resources, Modern Herbal, which was put together by a lady in the early 1900s, 1930s. This was collected from the 1800s to the early 1900s, and then she put them in book form. But this is all available online too, botanical.com. We have some other folks here, Meriwether, Foraging Texas is his website. They have great information on edible, local, and specifically Texas plants. Those are my main two go-tos for online research. But then there's just a ton of great books out there on just how to use wild plants.
And then you offer, like, if somebody wants to be in person, like reading, like I'm an experiential learner.
Yes.
But I do like to read. I mean, I really love reading too. But if I wanted to like go see and do.
Yeah. So I lead walks. I'm doing one Sunday actually for AJ Vagabonds over in Oak Cliff, which is going to be a edible medicinal plant walk, and we're just going to walk around the block. I did this walk last year or the year before, and we walked down the alley and around one block in Bishop Arts, and probably identified 35 different plants on that walk that were either edible, medicinal, or both.
And so if we come on a walk, we're going to learn
If
about
you come on a walk,
Yeah.
you're going to learn about stuff. Yeah, so they're all different. It just depends on what's growing then and what we find, and we just talk about something different every time.
You get to snack and sample.
Get snack and sample if there's enough. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So if there's not enough, then we won't eat it, but we'll just talk about it, and you can identify it and find some later. So
Very cool.
yeah, I have a website, Foraging DFW, so I'll post my walks on there. I have been doing a walk out at John Munker Sands Wetlands Center the third Saturday of every month at 10 o'clock. And we talk a lot about plants. We talk about the environment, about the animals, and water, which is another one of my areas of interest.
It all goes
because
together.
we're running out of water, and our population is growing. So
And we need water.
Our water situation is going to have to change dramatically in the future.
Yeah,
So-
and it all goes together. Like when you're responsible with what you're planting, that affects the water too. So
It does.
it's all related.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had plenty of water when people told us we ought to be planting St. Augustine in our yards, and now we don't. And so we're still kind of stuck back where we thought that all our resources were unlimited.
Yeah. I had some zoysia grass, which is the kind you really don't have to water a lot.
Right.
Like I put some of that in my backyard, but with also permaculture stuff, but less
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But I wish I would have known ahead of time to make a cooler yard
Yeah.
of stuff
Yep.
that you can eat.
Yep. So I
and,
try not
you
to
know,
plant anything in my yard that I can't eat or is not a medicinal plants or that my bees can't use.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, some other great books, like I said, that little golden book is really good. Secret Life of Trees. That's a great book if you're looking for something to read. Braiding Sweetgrass, which I just read in my Nature Lovers Book Club a few months ago, is just a really lovely book on how far we've gotten removed from not only our food source, but also the plants that are in our environment that we can use and are there for us to use.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Like just there by nature.
just there by nature. Yeah.
And the Secret Life of Trees really interests me. I'm a tree lover.
Yeah.
Like I will take walks and I won't look at the houses. I look at
Yeah.
their trees.
Yeah, trees are one of my favorite things too. I do a lot of walking in the Trinity Forest in the wintertime, just looking for giant trees. We've got, Dallas has the largest urban hardwood forest in the nation.
Really?
Urban being the key word, but
Yeah.
we've got over 6,000 acres of hardwood forest down in the Trinity River Valley, and this is there's places down there, but Saine and Jim Miller, the Saine Overlook, which was a winter campground for Comanche Indians. Saine Road used to be a trading path between the Comanches and the Apaches and the Caddo Indians. It was also a buffalo trail. Buffalo used to come up and down there. I was reading something the other day. They were talking about how in 1835, I can't remember his first name, but McComas, who McComas Avenue's named after, and that was his house was right there, McComas and Skillman, basically. How him and his family survived on a buffalo that they shot south of Dallas in about 1835. They survived the winter.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
So cool.
So we've got a bunch of great stuff here. White Rock Lake has some remnant native prairies. Our tallgrass prairies have been disappearing, again, from big agriculture, from people just plowing them and planting them.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people don't realize that White Rock Lake is the second largest interurban lake in the country. I think,
Did not know that.
I think New York City, the Central Park Lake is the only bigger one.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Who knew? What can, on just a side note from that, what can people do to just make stuff better in their own life with their things
Well,
anything,
like you say, just kind of stop buying into the general idea that things are good the way they are and start looking at for your yard, try to cut back on things that use water. Try to plant native plants so all of our native pollinators, they evolved with the native plants here. They didn't evolve with the plants that we have brought in. They didn't evolve with any of the Japanese or the Chinese plants that we use in our landscape, boxwood, all the honeysuckles, if any plant that has Japonica or chinensis as its species name is not a native plant to here and probably should be avoided. Edible landscapes are really, when I was in architecture school, I got fed up with architecture for a couple of years and I transferred to landscape architecture and learned about all these native plants. And one of the projects I did was landscaping with edible plants. And this was, 1980 or so before anyone was even looking at this. But we can just replace the plants we have with things that provide stuff for us.
And it can be aesthetically beautiful too.
Oh, they're
so it can
very
be
pretty.
So you're not compromising aesthetics.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was talking about the Yopon, not only the pharmacies and big pharmacies, they try to trick us too, but, botanists do it also. So Yopon holly, its botanical name is Ilex vomitoria. Vomitoria. Well, so the native peoples, it's and I've seen this at farmers markets down in Austin, but it's called cassia or black tea. So you can take the tips of the plant, you toast it in the oven at 200 for about 30 minutes. It turns really brown and oily, and then you can make a tea out of that. It's directly related to matcha. It's basically the same plant. The natives used it, but they would use it just for drinking, but they would also use it after they would fast for 3 or 4 days. So if you've ever fasted for 3 or 4 days, you know pretty much anything you eat or drink after that, you're going to throw it up. Well, Charles Linnaeus wanted to name this plant Ilex cassia. You know, he invented our classification system. And the way that plants are named, you send them to a botanist. So we had a bunch of really great botanists here, Lindheimer and Muhlenberg and Rivershawn, and, you know, who Rivershawn Park is named after. These people, you know, identified thousands of plants in our area. They sent them to botanists. Botanists would then name them, classify them, and name them. And they would generally honor the person that found them by naming them after that person. So you don't get to name a plant yourself, but the botanist will honor you by naming it after you. Well, they sent this Ilex vomitoria, the Yopon, to Europe to a botanist who was working for the East India Trading Company. So the East India Trading Company was importing matcha from the West Indies and selling it in Europe. And they didn't want any competition with American matcha. So instead of going with Charles Linnaeus's request to name it Ilex cassia, he named it Ilex vomitoria so people would think that they should not eat it or drink it.
Wow, because that's exactly what I thought of. I'm like, vomitoria, like,
right.
ew.
Yeah. So, you know, it's
tricky.
Yeah. You got to look at it from all sides.
Yeah, what was that good story you were going to tell if we had time?
That was it.
Oh, that was it, the vomitoria story.
The vomitoria story. Yeah, I mean, so, you know, not only is it large companies, but botanists mess with us too, you know, and they reclassify things all the time. You know, I've got a friend that Sam Kishnick that says anytime you think you know the botanical name of a plant, you need to look it up again because it's probably changed. But the good thing about botanical names is that once it's used, it's never reused for something else. So even if you don't know the current botanical name,
There's not gonna be two of the
that old
same.
name, they won't assign that name to something else. So.
And how do you know, like, when people are looking at things, is there bad information out there, like plant and otherwise, or are people kind of more on the up and up in this?
I think most of the stuff that I see is pretty legitimate. I don't really see anything, you know, by someone that actually knows what they're talking about. That's not good information. You know, we used to have, we have a lot of native passion flower, Passiflora incarnata, that grows in North Texas. And in the fall, not only does it have this really great fruit on it, but the leaves to that plant, I use them as a sleep aid. Before 1950, they were used for schizophrenic patients to help them fall asleep at night. Just a tea made out of the leaves.
Wow.
And it grows everywhere.
And way better than like.
And way better, yeah. I
sleeping
usually
pills
use
are
about
very
half
bad.
chamomile and about half. Make a cup of tea with that, and you just kind of drift off, and you don't even feel like you had anything.
Wow, that's really
So,
nice.
yeah.
Yeah. See, I talked about this before, but like I read a book on sleep. It's like all this research on sleep and and when people are on like sleep aids, you're like, I forget, but I wrote it down, like it's like you're 40% more likely to get cancer and 4.6 more likely to die. Like when they even test out for other factors, and you're like, whoa.
I believe it. And I don't think your quality of sleep is as good.
No, I
don't think
took
you
them
get
for a little
anywhere
bit of a
near-
while.
Anywhere near as much REM sleep. You know, you're just it's fake sleep.
I was losing my memory. Like, so I had insomnia for a long time, and I'd used hypnosis, but then got off of that, got on, prescription sleep aid. And then I was forgetting, and I was in like 31,
Right.
and like pretty young. I was like, how am I forgetting things like during the day? I was so afraid I'm like going to forget my kids, but then you get addicted to them. I had to like call my friend who's a doctor. I'm like, how do I get off of these things? You know, with that rebound insomnia. And then you can just look up stories.
Yeah.
Like,
It does. Once
Or-
you get
or
off
find a
of them,
plant.
you can't sleep.
Yeah.
You can't sleep. So it's a vicious circle,
yeah.
you know.
So what else did we not talk about that you think is good for people to know about plants, medicinal and otherwise, just stuff we don't know, and then we'll talk about how everybody can find you, get your information, go on these walks, and then because there's so many things from sleep aids, edibles, and then saving water. It's all like many layers to it.
It is, yeah. It's a deep rabbit hole. The deeper you go, the more there is, which is what's nice about it. It's not something you just learn and then you know it and you move on.
You can keep learning.
You can keep learning, yeah. So, yeah, that's about what I got. But I would encourage you guys to come out and walk with me and look at this stuff on the ground. We'll identify plants. We'll get you started.
Okay, so
and you can just start. People go, man, how do you know all this stuff? I'm like, well, I just started little. Just start with one or two, and then add one or two, and you don't try to learn it all at one time. This has been a process for me, and it's just like learning trees. It's interesting. I a lot of times when I start my walk, there's most people in the city can identify less than 10 trees, but they can identify over 1,000 corporate logos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that just kind of shows where we are.
And so good to be in nature, like also
it is.
Lots of research behind
it
just
is.
being
Yeah,
out.
just being in trees. Trees emit, pheromones and stuff that help to calm us. In Japan, they actually have Shinrin Roku is forest bathing, and it's it's prescribed sometimes to people just to go out in the forest.
Now they're prescribing nature walks. I'm a
Yeah.
mental health professional, but
Yeah.
like for people.
Well, and it's, our kids don't get out there. I think that's one of the reasons we have, so much more asthma and health problems now is because our children aren't exposed to this like we were when I was young. You were outside digging in the dirt, playing with worms, sticking your finger in your mouth.
Trying not to come inside.
And yeah, trying not to come inside. And now, everyone's scared to let their kids go outside and get dirty.
When we're really a safer country than we've ever been, except for maybe in schools, I guess.
Right. It's we get inoculated with stuff, in the birth canal and cesarean sections, which are great for doctors because they can prescribe when you're going to, they can only work during the daytime then. They don't have to come in the middle of the night to help you have a baby. But, you don't get all that great bacteria and stuff that you do from a natural childbirth if you're cesarean section.
Yeah, and so if you had to say, this is another thing, your top 2 favorite plants that you could just find in Texas.
So the three that my three favorite friends are the dandelion, the curly dock, and the plantain. Those three there are my top. I eat them. I make kimchi out of them. I ferment them like sauerkraut. They grow everywhere, and they can be used in so many different ways.
And free.
Yeah. I mean, they're here in the alley behind the studio. They're in the yard in front. They grow all over.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for just sharing just your knowledge with us.
You are very welcome.
And if you can just tell everybody, but we're going to put this in the show notes too, so you'll know where you can find Bob if you're in Dallas, if you want to go on a nature walk or see your special that's coming on, or your website, or just anything to get in contact with. Do your lawn differently.
Yeah.
Where can we find you?
Well, Foraging DFW is my webpage. It's on Facebook, and so I post all my walks on there. AJ Vagabonds Go Outside, their website. They also I lead walks through them. They've been really generous. And some of these are plant walks. Some of them are just nature walks. I do winter tree ID classes also.
Oh, nice. I want to get in on that.
And tree just regular tree ID classes, because people ought to know what's in their environment and what they can use. And I like to use, little anecdotes and tell people about things to give them a little mnemonic device to help them remember, instead of just saying that's that.
Right.
So I'd like to leave with a little quote by Thomas Rainier. He's a landscape architect and an environmentalist. And he says, the next renaissance of human culture will be the reconstruction of our natural world in our cities, and plants will be at the center of it all.
I like it. That's another way for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, side note, another way, not just learning stuff, but it really is good for your mental health.
Oh,
to be out there relaxing. You will calm down. Mm-hmm. It's like a winner.
It is. Yep. Get away from the TV. Leave your phone at home.
Right.
Come on out.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you. Yeah.
And for all of you listening, you know that there is always another way.